Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about the Instrument of Zeal and the Fanaticism buff and about the build that I did. Also I'm trying to figure out how to make my videos shorter, so I'll probably skip talking about all the items and just talk about the main things, about the key items, the skills, and then as always I'm gonna leave path for building import code in the description for you to analyze the build. Now the Fanaticism buff is a new thing for Inquisitor and it looks interesting, but in practice it's just not good, and unfortunately I could not find a convenient way to kind of maintain the buff. The next best thing I could figure out was to do attack to proc Frostbolt with the Spellslinger and then just manually cast Ice Nova. So maybe let's first look at the Instrument of Zeal. Gain Fanaticism for 4 seconds on reaching maximum Fanatic charges. Gain 1 Fanatic charge every second if you have attacked in the past second. Lose all Fanatic charges on reaching maximum Fanatic charges, which is 4. And then that's when you gain the Fanaticism. And the Fanaticism itself grants spells you cast yourself. This is very important wording. You cast yourself 75% more cast speed. More cast speed, not just increase. 75% reduced mana cost and 75% increased area of effect. So this buff lasts for 4 seconds. You can technically permanently have 100% uptime on this buff. However, you have to attack every single second at least once. You cannot like attack 4 times in a second because it's still gonna generate only 1 Fanatic charges. And I don't know what GG was thinking making this. It's an interesting idea, but it's just horrible way of doing it. No one's gonna want to actually play an attack build and then suddenly out of nowhere switch to casting spells, and that's just one of the issues. Like when you're fighting you can't even see the buff. It does have a small visual on your character, like some kind of glowy chest, but it's basically invisible while fighting. This buff is basically very inconvenient to use. You can like start the fight with that, like attack 4 times over like 4 seconds, get the buff and then just unload to start the fight. But during the fight it's very difficult to keep track of it and properly utilize, so in the end it's just kind of a wasted opportunity. I'm pretty sure you could achieve the same results with a normal build that always have the same cast speed without such weird conditions where you have to attack. Like I said, the second line, gain 1 Fanatic charge every 1 second if you have attacked in the past second. This is also very important wording because you don't get charge if you trigger an attack. So Vengeance, Repose, Reckoning, even Replica, Maloney's Mechanism, Quiver, nothing will trigger it. Nothing that triggers will count as you attacking. As far as I know, there's no like smooth way of maintaining those charges. So I am using Frenzy as an attack with the wand and then using Spellslinger to proc Frostbolt. When you're playing Frostbolt Ice Nova build, you naturally still have to click 2 things. You still have to cast Frostbolt manually and then you have to cast Ice Nova manually. This is kind of keeping the same like clunkiness of having to do 2 things, but instead of casting I'm attacking to proc the Frostbolt and then Ice Nova. You just cast Ice Nova on Frostbolt to get extra repeats, and it's just a nice playstyle. I could not figure out a better way to do it. You can like, let's say, Leap Slam or Shield Charge to kind of perform an attack every second, but that's just very clunky. And initially I was playing with the Ethereal Knives. I was still using Frenzy basically to just generate Frenzy charges and then just casting Ethereal Knives, because Ethereal Knives I was also using with the Nova Ethereal Knives Threshold Jewel. But eventually I just decided to go with the Frostbolt Ice Nova setup because it was more damaging, and freezes also help you, well, freeze enemies, and that's extra defensive layer because this build does not have very good defensive layers. In fact, it is kind of squishy. I do have almost 6000 life and 2000 energy shield with the Corrupted Soul, but I do not have Fortify. I refuse to shield charge to get Fortify. I absolutely refuse to do that, and since I am using a wand I cannot use the Vigil with Vigilant Strike and General Cry shenanigans to proc Fortify. So I tried to solve my defensive layers through like kind of expensive ways. I got a helmet and body armor with physical damage taken as fire on the helmet and as lighting on the body armor. Then I do have blind on hit gloves. I do have quite high block chance. In fact, I do reach 75% attack block with the Rumi's Concoction, but it's like not really focused on getting maximum block, because if I did that, I would have to sacrifice other things. This build is also kind of expensive. It's like below 20 exalts but way above 10 exalts. But that doesn't mean that you have to invest that much to start it going. But if you really enjoy this kind of playstyle, you would just better do Pledge of Hands with the Frostbolt Ice Nova, because it's gonna be more damage and it's gonna be way easier to build, and you won't need Fanaticism to have the good damage. Actually, it also has a lot of conditional things. Most of my damage I get during the Fanaticism. I am also using focus mods to give me some mitigation and chance to deal double damage, and also Valorous Fire. And on top of that, I am using Intensify, which requires me to kind of stand still for a couple seconds, basically, to get maximum Intensify stacks. And of course, it requires me to actually hit with Frenzy and to get the Frenzy charges. But the damage is actually very nice. It's over 7 million DPS with everything combined. So the damage can be great, but you can also achieve that kind of damage with the Pleasure of Hands without the clunkiness and without the requirement of you attacking all the time. One more thing about this build, which is very unintuitive and very weird. Usually when you get more cast speed, you start having more mana problems. You basically are unable to sustain mana, but this time your mana goes to 0 when you get massive cast speed. So, which is great, right? But then when you don't have Fanaticism, your mana goes back to being, well, not 0, and that's when you start having mana issues if you do not constantly try to get Fanaticism. So with this build, you either way have to kind of continuously keep creating new Frostbolts, so you're gonna be naturally forced to attack, and the uptime of the Fanaticism may not be like, let's say 50% of the time you're gonna have Fanaticism. You're basically gonna have to get used to this kind of playstyle where you attack like every 1 or 2 seconds and then just unload the Ice Nova, but not too much, because you're gonna run out of mana eventually. Now the thing, if you use Inspiration, even level 1 Inspiration, during the Fanaticism, you will have 0%, or should I say 100% reduced mana cost. So you can counter that by getting increased mana cost, because if you have 0 mana cost, your Inspiration cannot be ramped up, right? Because you have to consume mana. Same goes for Arcane Surge. If you don't have any mana cost, you cannot ramp up Arcane Surge to give you damage boost. So you can counter that by getting increased mana cost. There is on a passive tree, but that's couple points. Did not want to travel there. You can also get Fever Mind, but then you sacrifice some life, or well, you're still gonna have to sacrifice some passive points. Fever Mind does increase the mana cost, it does give some spell damage, and then the mana cost will be 1. But then, what happens when you do not have Fanaticism? Then your mana cost becomes even higher. You would need to get even more mana regen and mana sustain. So to counter that, I am using two rings with -7 mana total mana cost, and I am using Replica Conqueror's Efficiency Jewel, which does have -9 mana cost. And my mana is still 53. But during the Fanaticism, my mana cost goes to 0. And I am not using Inspiration, so I don't need to worry about maintaining Inspiration charges, right? Like you see, my mana cost goes to 0, and I get massive cast speed. But the issue is, during that Fanaticism buff, you're still gonna have to attack once every second, so you're still gonna be wasting the opportunity to do the damage during the Fanaticism. No matter how you look at it, it's just not gonna be. Damage numbers on paper look great, but you're not gonna have those damage numbers all the time. That's the issue. You're not gonna have it all the time. So in reality, this is probably more like a 5 million DPS build. But with these kind of defenses, I would not recommend building this for actual endgame. But it's very satisfying for map clear. It does kill your FPS. Now I'm gonna quickly talk about the key items and passives and stuff like that. And if you've got any questions, ask them in the comments below. You basically need a wand. You want a wand and a shield then, obviously, if you're gonna be using this method. And since this is a cold skill, you're gonna want +1 cold, like spell damage, all that stuff that scales cold. I also bought Alf's Uprising for Zealotry, to squeeze in Zealotry for free basically, which is also kind of expensive, like around 5x. Actually, this is a very good helmet. I crafted this helmet with the... You want Blizzard Crown and you want Warlord's Influence. Warlord's Influence can roll critical strike, it can roll elemental damage, and you don't care about enemy resistances. This is not using Pious Path. So this crown just does give a lot of flat damage. The drawback is minimal, and then you want crit multi, life, and then physical damage from hits taken as fire. You can kind of guarantee that, but I'm not gonna talk about how to craft it. It would take too long. The body armor. This was like a longer project to craft this body armor, but basically you want exploded body armor with power charge and crit. Anything else doesn't really matter. As you can see, it's not even finished. And then the rest of the items, you want blind gloves, you want assassin's mark on hit ring, and yeah, the boots don't really matter that much. Now level 21 Ice Nova is kind of expensive, so if you want like a more budget version, get level 20 quality 20 anomalous Ice Nova. It does give 30% increased damage against shield enemies, which is not as good as level 21 normal Ice Nova, but it's still better than level 20. And then links are Spellslinger, Control Destruction, Energy Leech, Phantasmal Intensify, and then Hypothermia. So yeah, those are the main links. And for now the Frenzy, I actually link Frenzy with faster attacks, GMP, and additional accuracy because I need to be able to hit to get the frenzy charges. So, and GMP helps and faster attacks makes it smoother. I had one issue where I was constantly cancelling the animation of frenzy and just not proccing the Frostbolt until I put my frenzy on the middle click and on the right click Ice Nova. That way I have to release my right click to be able to click middle button, because maybe it's just me, maybe you don't have this issue. I have Spellslinger, Zealotry, max level Clarity, which I was supposed to replace, but I still had mana issues, and then Hatred and level 1 Vitality. And I wanted level 1 Vitality because of Watcher's Eye. This kind of Watcher's Eye is pretty cheap, like 30 heals, 40 heals. You want generic damage leech while affected by Vitality, so that's my source of damage leech. And then something for Zealotry. Cast speed is kind of cheapest option. And then on the rest of the passive skill tree, I did try to get a bit of mana cost reduction on the passive tree near the glancing blows. I put Glorious Vanity in here because I don't really waste anything. And yeah, the rest you see the passive tree. If you want to copy this build, I'm gonna leave Path of Building import code in the description. And other than that, there's nothing too special about this build. Like I said, you can check all the items through the Path of Building. Overall, I kind of, in the end, liked this build. There was a period where I hated it, but I think it was just a bad day. Everything was just bad. Nothing was working fine for me, and I just kept dying. But it is, remember, it is a bit squishy build, and you kind of have to get used to this playstyle. You have to, but I still would not recommend doing like this for like the very end game bosses. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it. I still haven't decided my next build. I will probably do another video about the self-free shenanigans, and maybe someone is gonna have like a glowy brain idea. I'm gonna talk about that in the next video. So for now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.